Jonathan Crane. I'm a mediocre Cat 2 cyclist out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And I'm Ben Edwards, head coach at Skyway Cycling and team director at Skyway, presented by Domestique Coffee. This is going to be a kind of a quick
So,
episode, and a bomb kind of dropped on us this morning.
a, a, a couple of bombs, I feel like.
Yeah,
We thought we were going to have a straightforward episode where we could just talk about our experience at NCL Atlanta, which we were at. Was that last weekend already? I don't know. It's
it was
time's going by
2 weeks ago.
less than 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago. We were out there. Thought we were going to just be able to focus on that this episode, but some things have developed. So we're going to get to NCL Atlanta, and that is going to be the main segment. But before we get into that, there's some stuff that we just got to talk about. So something we have been hinting at, talking around. We had, kind of the inside line on it. I feel like pretty early. One of the maybe the first episode of this show, even first couple,
yeah,
talking about Legion launching their own series that's kind of the outgrowth of the Lions Den crit that we saw a couple of years ago, got announced today.
yeah. Officially announced. It's going to be the Crit Championship Tour, and the first day for this race is October 21st of this year. Middle of
Yeah,
cyclocross season. Not a fan.
cyclocross erasure. Yeah, yeah. No, I leave cyclocross alone. It's my favorite form of racing. Okay, like we're going to be balanced as we always are on this show. So the good of it is that it's hot. It is crazy hot this year. The NCL Atlanta race, we'll get to it. It was super hot. It was too hot to be racing. So maybe in October. Oh, and like Masters Nationals, we'll get there. Matt Winstead, who NCL Atlanta went from there to Masters Nationals, and also Jaden Yeager, who's on my Zwift team, Restart, was out at Masters Nationals, and just brutal conditions out there. So maybe crit being so late, that's one advantage. But starting a series in October, okay, it's September right now basically, and
Right.
they're just announcing that the series is going to happen this year.
It's
Seems a
it's pretty
little
late.
short.
It's pretty late, but I mean, it's
Yeah,
still like if the first race is October 21st, that's almost 2 months time. I do think the location being St. Petersburg, Florida, is a little odd, if I'm going to be honest.
yeah,
But
not a
I mean,
cycling mecca or a
no, and
major
it's
city
not.
or
Yeah, it's not
yeah.
like a. Maybe we're just not
I
in the
don't know how
know.
they
Maybe
ended
it
up
is.
there. So yeah, if you're someone who knows like what's going on with St. Petersburg, Florida, let us know. But we certainly don't know about what's going on down there. So the few things we do know, this came out today. Not a lot of info about it. We've been speculating whether it was going to happen this season or not. But Legion, okay, one of the things I didn't like and I continue to not like about the Lions Den crit that they had 2 years ago is that Legion fielded two teams. There was a lot of talk around how that is goofy and whether or not there's collusion. It's just like creating an atmosphere of it could be happening. It's just not good, it's weird. So the only teams we know about now are Legion Team 1, Legion Team 2, and Miami, which is Legion Team 3, and Aviators, which is Legion Team 4.
Yeah.
So, and they're only listing the Legion women's team on the women's side.
Yeah, that
So,
leads me to
uh,
believe that there's like more teams involved in the works, but they're like on that page, they're just going to say the Legion teams or the teams that are part of the Legion ecosystem. Because
there
as
would
much as
have to be more teams
yeah,
involved, right? I mean, at this point, if
you
it's
would
it's
you would
so
think
close to race time. Yeah.
right. Maybe they're doing like the Lions Den thing where they're like putting like a Boston team together and like a and doing that and they just haven't like fully fleshed out those
Where they're
rosters.
where they're essentially taking existing teams, stripping them of their branding and making them like uh whatever, like was Boston the Butcher Box was the Boston team, and like
Yeah.
I think at Lions Den it was something like that, where most of the teams that competed were basically the roster of an existing team, but with um, the city kind of replacing the title sponsor, which this is something else I've said, but works for Legion. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to build a whole league of. There's just not a lot of money in cycling, and Legion being named Legion, like brands being associated with them, it's working for them. I'm not sure if that is workable on a wider scale. It's already so hard to get title sponsor money. So to get title sponsor money and then have to tell them you're not going to be on the jersey, I think that's going to get tougher and tougher as more teams try to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like the business of this is always, well, if we get 50 grand from you, then we're going to name, our team you, and you're going to get all the spotlight for that 50 grand. And the way works is the only reason Legion's able to do it is because Legion as a team itself has this crazy brand recognition that I'll give Justin credit here. He's worked his ass off to build that brand recognition and it works for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, like when teams fold, like when you see a team like I don't know, like ACG, like everyone thought it was a new team. Well, it turned out it's really just best buddies with a different name. And so the
Right.
team doesn't have any brand; it's just the sponsors, and so it's going to be incredibly hard
Yeah.
unless these teams really start focusing on building a brand. And honestly,
I think it
Jonathan
works
Goddard
for
talked about
Legion
this.
because
Yeah,
they're yeah, I think it works for Legion because they're the exception,
yeah,
Like Legion came out doing a lot of things different, but if that becomes the norm, I think it kind of quits working. So almost like
right,
scaling up with that model is like working against the model.
right.
So positives and negatives here, or like just what we know about it. The races are going to be longer. You said you found that somewhere, 2 hour races.
Yeah. So
I
the
think
pro
I
race
like
will
that.
be 2 hours.
Um,
I think it's good. I think
uh,
like
and they're going to have amateur races. That's another
that's another
plus, I
pro.
would say, versus
Yeah.
NCL. Like, I want to do a Cat 2 race at this. So
Yep.
I'm into that.
Yeah. There's also like a
Um,
Fondo as well. So like they figured out that like they have to have amateur participation. Um, they are selling admission tickets, which sort of the egalitarian appeal of cycling is that you can just go up and watch the race for free, and so they're kind of stripping that away.
yeah,
But
we're losing you a little bit, Ben, but I think I know what you're saying, which is that a large part of the appeal of cycling is that you can just walk up and watch it. And with
yeah,
NCL and with this league, we're seeing that kind of, yeah, we're seeing that go away to some degree with NCL and with this league. Although this league is selling general admission for $35 and VIP for 99, which is cheaper than NCL, but it's still something. And it looks like they're offering like a paired back. Looks like we've got a men's open masters race, a men's open 2, 3, 4 race, and it's only 30 minutes long, and two women's races. So there's other stuff going on, but it's not like a normal USAC day where there's 10 races all day. I do feel like I like them combining categories. I think they're going to get like good full fields, but
yeah.
I think that paring it down that far, you should just make the races an hour, especially if the pro race is 2. I don't know. That's
I think like okay, it's what if I'm reading that right? It's $50 for the 2, 3, 4, 60. I'm having a
yeah,
hard time reading it, but it's like
$60.
yeah,
Yeah,
sixty
60
dollars.
tiny font.
Yeah, $60 for a 30-minute race is not not worth it to me. I think that race needs to be an hour for sure. Like a regular 2-3
Yeah.
race is 45 minutes and a regular 2-3 is like $40. I think if you're charging $60, a minute is like a fair price.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough sell, but because there are so few opportunities to race for amateurs, I think they'll sell out all those fields because they've combined it down to just those 3 for the men.
Probably
Anyway,
so.
we've
Yeah.
gotten we've gotten down a big rabbit hole here before that's sort of the preamble. I guess the other funny thing there to note is that they were using a photo from an ACC race for the promo of their new league that's not ACC, where you can see the ACC leaders jersey in the photo. Which I mean, they have to use a photo from another race, but like it's just funny that the competing leagues leaders jersey and like logo is visible in that. Um,
Right.
so the other thing we kind of expected to be able to not to be able to we don't want to, but we expected to gloss over Indy a little bit, which we had the Indy Momentum Indy weekend last weekend, which had no stream. So we expected that basically what we were going to have to say there was the results maybe, but there was an incident that affected those results that everybody's talking about. So I feel like we got to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Again, it always sucks when a race doesn't have a stream, but thankfully there's people like Will Harden and a few others that are recording these races and putting them out.
yeah, so I'll say we know infinitely more about the men's than we do about the women's because some people like Will Harden put their streams up. So this is the last really going into the last corner of the men's race from Will Harden Project Echelon. And when we upload the podcast, upload this to YouTube and all that, I'll put links to all the videos we're watching down here if you want to go watch the live, watch the footage for yourself and kind of scrub through it on your own. But basically, what happens is there's this final corner that it's a really sharp right-hander with like a traffic island that kind of juts out a little bit into the it's not fenced off. It's kind of a traffic island without any fencing, and they just lay down on the island. And basically what happens is um Summerhill, who is right in the middle of the video, you can see everyone is kind of leaned one way, and Summerhill is leaned the opposite direction. He just rides up onto the traffic island and basically ramps it to straighten out his line, and does that to. I don't know how much of an advantage it is. It seems like a pretty decent advantage because he was able to win the race from that position. So basically, he comes off of this traffic island at a straighter angle than everybody else and is able to like launch his sprint a little earlier. It's it's kind of the beginning of a theme. There's a little bit of like a cutout for the like ADA crosswalk accessibility there. So he is able to just roll up on it. I was looking the first thing I saw of it was the other side and I thought maybe he had hopped a curb like he had been pushed or something, but it really looks like he made a pretty conscious decision to choose that line. So he was relegated for that, and he won the race, but then he was relegated to fourth, which meant Ty Magner won the race.
Yeah.
Um, that relegation to fourth, though, does leave Summerhill was in the lead for the ACC overall. That leaves Summerhill with the lead.
Yeah. Yeah, he needed to get fourth to secure the lead, like mathematically win it. So he gets the fourth and secures the ACC lead for the season. That way, I'm going to be honest. Maybe this is just me coming from a mountain bike background and cutting lines is normal, but in my opinion, if it's not, like taped off specifically or
Yeah, if
fenced
it's not
off, like
blocked, if it's not.
it's an it's an open line in my opinion. I don't think he should have been relegated for that, but I guess like unless they said in the pre-race, which we don't have access to, said, hey, the cones mark the course like that. Otherwise, in my opinion, if it's within the fencing, it's fair game.
This was a thing in cyclocross too. To get to cyclocross a few years ago, I guess probably 10 years ago now. Zach McDonald, there were some barriers that there wasn't a stake with tape on either end of the barriers. The tape was kind of loose, and he was pushing the tape out and riding around the barriers.
Yeah.
And that was a big controversy. But basically, what came out of that, they created a rule that like you can't ride around the barriers, but also most organizers just realized they had to put a stake in at the side of the barrier, and then you just can't do that. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think they probably should have just put one piece of fencing out on that island. I think they were
Yeah.
just trying to work around that and maybe save a piece of fencing, but there's a couple of ways to handle it, and one is to say anything that is coned off is also off limits. They could say
Yeah.
that, and you might be
Yeah.
relegated, but that rule needs to be written in
Yeah.
if it's
For
not
sure.
already. And we're gonna that's a theme. We're gonna get to more of that. I do want to just like run down the results for this race before we move on. Kendall Ryan and Skylar Schneider 1 and 2, followed by Garcia from Virginia's Blue Ridge 2024 on the women's side. Sorry, switching over to the men here. As usual, the results are in a format that is hard to just pop around
where,
on.
where you have 10 tabs and the results, like you click it and it sends you somewhere else, and you have 2 tabs for each result click. I really wish there was a
Yeah, that's
better
that's
way.
exactly. I guess the big story on the men's side is just that Legion won on the men's and the women's side for that race. It is not the last race of the ACC. We got one more coming up this weekend, but on the men's side, the men's individual rider overall is locked up at this point. Danny Summerhill with ACG. So the what the podium ended up being is Ty Magner from Legion, Jamie Castaneda from ACG, and Brandon Fury, national champion from Blazers, in third. Good to see Fury Monk getting on a podium, although I guess he did come across the line fourth, and he has been. I said it on our last episode. He's kind of like in that fifth to seventh. Like he's always there, but he's never like getting a big result. So
Yeah.
a little bit more of the same for him. Maybe one position better. Yeah, he's always there or thereabouts.
Yeah, he's always there, like we said last week. If he had a stronger team around him that could sort of get him in position a little bit better, a little bit further forward in the group, he would be on the podium at 85% of these big crits.
Yeah, and it seems like the Legion. I'm gonna start calling them Legion teams 3 and 4. So Blazers and Aviators, since we've
Sure.
got Legion 1 and 2 just in Legion. The Legion 3 and Legion 4 have been having trouble gelling as teams this year. We haven't seen a lot from Aviators. There is a new like documentary thing that follows Aviators at Tulsa on GCN Plus, and honestly, there's been so much racing recently. I haven't had a chance to check it out, but I'm definitely gonna go watch that and see maybe if we can like glean some insight into what's going on in Aviators, because as we've talked about, Aviators, Blazers, they both have. Blazers has had an okay season. They got the win at Nationals with Fury. They've gotten some results with Johnny Brown at the Snake Alley weekend. They've gotten results here and there. I feel like
Yeah.
Aviators is first year, but they maybe have more talent on paper than Blazers and have not come up with much to show for it.
I would agree. So recently I've had an inordinate amount of free time, and I did watch the Aviators documentary. It covers the team during Tulsa, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't think it provides a whole lot of extra insight. It really centers around Dante Young. And they talk to Connor White a good bit, but I mean, it's honestly Brendan Fury's like hardly mentioned, and kind of, in my opinion, made out to sort of be. He kind of gets the WoW treatment from Unchained, if I'm being honest. So it's a little weird to me. I will say that
Well,
Aviators,
Fury's on Blazers, not Aviators.
that Blazers, good lord, Fury on the Blazers documentary gets a little bit of the WoW treatment from Unchained. Pivoting over to the Aviators conversation, I think they brought on Lucas Bourillon, who I think once he sort of gets mixed in and gelled in, he'll start to kind of bring that team a little bit more together. I think they were maybe planning on Eamon Lucas sort of being the team leader, the guy that's going to sort of hold the team together and make them gel. And I don't think he's really lived up to that. And and they have really strong talent, but they're just not able to execute at these races, and they haven't really been able to put together a good result.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is like Iman, Connor, like they have guys that on paper I would think would be better, but it's a first year team and maybe came together a little late. They didn't have as much time to like do their training camps and it's also just been a tough season. Like there's a lot of teams that are sort of leveling up. I would say that like Texas Roadhouse has leveled up in a big way this year, which we're going to talk about. You know what? That's a good transition. Let's just go straight to NCL.
Cool.
So we were at NCL Atlanta, the final NCL race of the season. I've got a little bit of a recap video type situation up on my YouTube. I don't know what you would be doing if you were here watching this or listening to this and you know, haven't gotten the notification that although the YouTube algorithm is weird, maybe it didn't tell you this video went live, but it's kind of just some behind the scenes, what I was able to shoot in the day and talk through sort of the vibe on the ground. So if you want to know more about that, go watch this video. I think right here we should get into more of the racing side of it. And we had some interesting racing across the women's and the men's here. Definitely different than anything we've seen in any of the other NCL races.
Yeah. The course was really dynamic. There was, I think we timed it 40 seconds between, like, the furthest distance between U-turns was 40 seconds. There was like 3 or 4
Yeah.
U-turns on the course. It was really technical. There was some punchy hills, and it made for some really exciting racing and some fun breakaway action.
Yeah, it was definitely a dynamic course, and I went back and watched all of the streams. I guess, to give a little bit of context, we were there on the ground. There wasn't a lot of room that we were allowed or anybody was allowed to run around. I was hoping to be able to get in the pit, but that ended up being the thing that like the riders we got to talk to, I asked about the pit. Confirmed for me that the pit is a little bit of a gray area. I think there were a lot of promises made before the season that the pit was going to be some kind of like digital timing mat system, and like I don't know if maybe that just didn't work as slickly as they thought it would, or what. But in NorCal Cycling put out a video about his experience racing NCL Denver today, and he also confirms that the pit was a little bit unorganized, and he proposed a couple of solutions that I think I agree with about just like the transponders on the bike need to have a line, and when you cross the line, it kind of lights up something. Because right now, it's basically the USA Cycling official eyeballing it and telling people when to go,
Yeah.
which just seems like chaos. And
Yeah.
was confirmed for us to be chaos by the riders we talked to in the race.
Yeah, and I
We
think
weren't
it's
able to get
not.
over there ourselves, but
Yeah.
we could see and sense the chaos.
Right. And it doesn't help that it's not an NCL official running the pit who like understands the rules. It's a USAC official who like may or may not understand the rules as well as anybody else who's there. So I think that
Right.
makes it trickier as well. And I think the tech side of it they're still working on, and I think in next year they might have some sort of electronic timing or go system. But I think the
Yeah.
only way to do it really really well is like track style. If they have like when you start on the track, they like hold your saddle. If there's like some sort of electronic mechanism that holds your saddle like a BMX start, and as
Yeah.
one rider crosses a line, it triggers the start gate for you to go
Yeah. Yeah.
instantaneously. I think
NorCal
that's
was talking about a gate
yeah,
system, but the main thing is like it needs to be formalized and digitized. Like it
yeah,
needs to be a thing where it's not somebody looking. Because right now, like the USA Cycling officials, I don't know. I think they have a decent, you know, I think they understand what's going on or whatever, especially as the series has progressed. Although I don't think it's been the same officials at every race, but they are having to do it more like they would do a free lap. And I guess the difference is that free laps are so much less frequent and they are the result of a mishap or mechanical or something. They're not a strategic part of the racing, whereas the pit exchanges are happening all the time and they are like those 2 or 3 seconds. If you're really only taking one free lap, maybe two different times you're taking a free lap during a race. And so the 2 seconds you get here or there are not affecting the race in as large of a way as like most teams are subbing someone every 2 laps. That's beginning to, and they're using it tactically. Like on this course, the pit was close to a very technical hairpin, and then the finish. So teams were like attacking to get a gap. Rider pulls into sub, and the rider coming out of the pit is attacking for the 3 points available on that lap, the highest points available. So
Yeah.
it's like I guess what I'm saying is it works fine for free laps. It's a little sketchy here and there in a traditional crit race, but in this context where this is not an afterthought for like how you mitigate a flat tire, this is crucial strategic part of the racing.
Yep.
It needs to be we got to take the human element out of it as much as possible.
Right.
And
Like
even if
it
the
is.
timing mats are getting a little weird or whatever.
Yeah. No, it is like crucial and necessary to be successful at NCL is like knowing how to pit well and use pits to your advantage. And the human element, like the 1 or 2 seconds you take to okay, this rider crossed, okay, now you can go, like greatly affects the race because you're scoring points every single lap and there's breaks involved. And like we've heard multiple people say, "Oh yeah, you'll gain a second or two by pitting or whatever." That they've been able to grow gaps or shrink gaps that way, and like there has to be some sort of way to make it completely objective all the time and have it run
Exactly.
smoothly.
Right. So that's something we saw. Like at Denver, I think all of the teams realized they were gaining seconds when they were pitting, and they started using that to gain time.
Yeah,
Um, it was a little bit different at this race where it wasn't as consistent that a pit exchange was netting you seconds. But I think some of that was just down to the officials were calling it in such a way, like releasing riders in such a way that it wasn't necessarily as big of a again, it was like the human element. I'm fine with if at a race it's like the way this pit is set up, it's a little longer, and maybe it is giving you a second here or there. um I'm kind of okay with that as long as it's consistent how that's happening. You know what I mean?
right,
As long as everyone has the same opportunity. I think what's going on right now is like that's not necessarily the case. Like not everyone is getting the same opportunity in that way.
right. It's because there's so much room for human error with it, like, and also potential bias from an official to maybe not saying there's any foul play, but the potential for it is there. And so it's, you want to
Yeah.
eliminate things like that as much as possible. And I think that's one area where the NCL can greatly improve is by smoothing out and objectifying the pit areas.
Yeah. So we did hear from their CEO Paris Wallace that we overheard him basically like referring to this as a pilot season. So I'm hoping that those are the kind of things they're going to iterate. And every race we've seen has been different, like for good and for bad. I actually think this one on the broadcast side was a little bit less clean in terms of those points over on the left hand side. In Denver, they did a really good job of like pretty much every lap or every time I thought like, oh, I'm not sure who got points, it would pop up with like 3, 2, 1 on this lap, and then they get added in. The
Yep.
frequency of the points getting like tallied and shown up there was a little bit more all over the place on this broadcast. So I don't know if that's a difference of technology or there was some kind of challenge with the way this venue was set up or something, but it's like they figured it out and then we backed back off of it.
Yeah, I'm one. There must have been some sort of like 5G or bandwidth issue causing that, but still, I think like other than the lap tallying, I think the coverage was pretty good overall for this one. There's a lot of infrastructure for cameras. There was no drones allowed because it's right next to an airport, but like the way some of the coverage was, like with the sliding cameras and everything, I think it was really good and provided some angles and style of footage that you normally don't see in a race.
Yeah, I'll say they did. Like one thing we criticized early on is that we weren't seeing the pit and we weren't seeing the pit exchanges, so we kept losing track of what rider was what and who was actually in the race at a given time.
Yep.
I feel like this race, it's going to be hard to show everything happening all the time, but this race did show the pit more often and give a little bit more context for like what teams were subbing in and out, and you could kind of see that happening every lap. Um, a thing that I'll ding it for that like we had much better experience there on the ground than watching it back. So like watching it back, I kind of had an idea of what was going on a little bit more, but um, so this course was really technical. A lot of hairpins. We talked about that already. Longest distance between hairpins was basically like the start finish straightaway into the hairpin that kind of goes uphill that we were standing on at the beginning. That was about 50 seconds, but the rest of it there was a hairpin every few seconds, which is going to break the race apart because it's slowing down and speeding back up so often. And so that once the race breaks down, we never got a gap in this women's race. Some very aggressive racing, and we had some racers get way off the front, and we were going from like tight shot of the breakaway to tight shot of the field, and it was hard to orient myself with like watching it back. How big is that gap? You know, we never got a like time check type situation.
Right. Yeah, I wish one thing they could add is say, hey, the break is 10, 15 seconds up. Um, or like, because otherwise it's very
Right.
hard to tell like what's going on. Yeah, you see the points being allocated, but it's not telling the full story of like what the pack is doing along with what the break is doing, other than just like panning shots, which isn't telling us what the information we need to know. So that is
Right.
one downside to the way they're doing this without any time at all.
Yeah. So this race did play out, especially the women's race, in a way that is completely different to every other NCL race. The other two NCL races, basically the two endemic teams have just run away with it. The Miami Blazers and the Denver Disruptors um, have scored the vast majority of the points in this race. We had some of the teams that have been more or less shut out set out really early with some really strong riders. Ali, I believe we're looking at Ali Shafi. This gets back to the thing of like it's hard to tell who's in and who's out for a given team at a given time, but I believe we're looking at Ali Shafi from Fount Cycling, a team that's not scored a ton of points this season, set off really early. Someone from CCB, I believe it was mostly, and again, in the breakaway, they're subbing riders in and out of the breakaway. So it gets a little hard to talk about it. They're subbing in and out. They're not necessarily saying who's who subbing in and out, but a rider from Fount, a rider from CCB get together. Both of them are consistently subbing, and they just scooped up all of the points. Like from 25 to go on, they had those 1 and 2 positions locked down.
Yeah, that was really exciting and honestly made those two's NCL seasons because the points they scored moved them up from like ninth or tenth into fourth and fifth, and so or fourth or fifth, and now
Yeah,
you're talking with the NCL
that's money.
payouts a lot of money. So they had a phenomenal race, and I think we kind of talked about this again, not on the show as sometimes we do. Part of it is we kind of had the theory that the Miami Knights women's team sort of knew they had the points in such a way that if other teams were scoring, they didn't have to worry about scoring as long as Denver wasn't picking up those third place
Yep.
1 point laps or making sure they outsprint them on the final lap. And I think
Yeah.
that played into why those two women stayed out for 25 laps.
Yeah. So I mean, good on them to like read the situation and know maybe this is our opportunity, because it would have been insane to try and set out on a breakaway like this in one of the earlier races. But knowing that kind of mathematically your team can't touch those top two teams and they're going to be looking at each other, and I do think that's a little bit of what happened. Is like Miami and Denver had enough lead, each of them, um, those two teams had enough of a lead on everyone else that they were only worried about each other. And then that created a big open door where the only teams that were going to be chasing them down were the non-endemic teams that are not Miami and Denver. Um,
Yeah.
we are looking at a turn that, getting back to the Summerhill thing, some riders were cutting through the grass on one of these 180s and cutting the turn short. I don't know what it is about like this week or this 2 week period, but like everyone is cutting corners short around cones.
Again, I think we're just so used to seeing fences, and if we don't see a fence, we're not bothered. Like
Yeah,
unless it's a race where the only course marking are cones. If I'm looking for a fence, I'm looking for a fence. A cone's not necessarily indicating the course to me.
right. And we only saw it in the women's race. I think between the women's and the men's, they must have gone to the teams and said like, "Hey, if we catch you doing this, you're getting thrown out of the race." But for the women, it was kind of all bets are off, and they were out there. So, we introduced the concept last race of the sort of combativity award, and the obvious choice here would be Fount Cycling because they were able to stay out for so long. But I want to use this to like highlight someone who did something, that was maybe not heralded or didn't get as much attention. So I'm gonna go with Jacqueline LaRoche, from Roxo Racing, who went
Yeah.
out and basically from the last 5 laps where you're not allowed to sub anymore was just riding in no man's land between the two up the road. So picking up 1 point every time through for that Roxo squad, but a really gutsy ride to stay out there with no one and just hang out in no man's land for so long. Just
Yeah.
really brutal, especially on a day like this. It was.
Yeah. No
I
kidding.
mentioned that it was hot. It was crazy hot.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. I think the ambient temperature was like 93, and then you put the asphalt and the no shade, and then the humidity, and it was triple digits. Like feels like out on the course, and so it was brutal. And I think that's part of why Denver Disruptors weren't quite as active, as well as because most of their team is not in the southeast, and they're not used to the level of humidity. And honestly, in the southeast, the humidity is not something you can even adapt to, anyways. You just have to kind of know how to work around it. And so, I just think they didn't quite have it to compete with, not compete with, but just handle the heat. I think the heat management really got
Yeah,
to a lot of these teams.
yeah, I agree. We talked about the altitude for the previous race, the Denver NCL race, and the ACC race in Colorado as well. And going from that to the heat is like a totally different type of acclimation. And
Yep.
we saw riders that were excelling at one and not the other, and kind of back and forth. So I was sort of interested to go back and see what was going on in the group behind that they couldn't pick up those two riders that stayed out for 20 some odd laps. And yeah, it seems to me like all of the teams that really had the motivation to chase, not Denver, not Miami, those teams are so used to Denver and Miami taking up the reins that it took a long time for them to establish like, oh, Denver and Miami are not chasing this, so we're gonna have to get up there and chase, and just they could never get organized. And then they were also sprinting for the 1 point that was available every lap. And I think the big loser there was actually Goldman Sachs. I feel like that team had done really well, sort of like picking up the scraps behind Denver and Miami, and they had a pretty well established strategy. They did well in Denver and
Yep.
well in relatives terms, kind of best of the rest. Well, but they did a good job of like playing the Denver v Miami uh, dynamic to their advantage, kind of hide a little bit and sprint where they could. And this was one where if you were queuing off Denver and Miami, you were in the second group and you're out of the points.
Right. That was Goldman Sachs. Like they've been one of the smaller teams. Like they're not fielding the six riders either. So I think their horsepower was down a little bit as well. And but they raced smart. They raced well. They figured it out, and they scored some points, which I think in Miami they didn't score any. So they figured it out a little bit better, and they were one of the few teams that were really helping drive the pace. But I mean, it was just the way the course was. If you're in that big group, you can't take those U-turns as fast as you can as a group of one or two, and they just couldn't. There wasn't enough straightaways to build up this speed to catch those two that were out front.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a course that definitely favored a smaller group, which, I guess that's really so. Fount Cycling ended up winning on the women's side, although really what they did was just stack up 99 points in the. They're calling it halves, so I'm going to go with that for NCL. First half, second half. Women's race was the first
Yeah.
half. Stacked up 99 points, and going into the men's half, but yeah, they won the final sprint, and that is huge points. So they set that men's team up so well that to jump to the men's race, the men's Fount team, um, men's so the top two teams here, Fount and CCB, which CCB and Foundation are paired up. Neither of them scored any points on the men's side in the second half. So that
Yeah.
entire second half of the race, those two teams start at the top of the leaderboard and everyone else is just creeping up closer to them. So
Right.
it made it exciting. It added some tension to it versus what we've seen at some of the other NCL races.
Right. And it made it so Fount scoring 99 points made it to where the Texas Roadhouse men like actually had to get on the front foot a little bit to keep their third place standing in the series, which also added another layer to that as well, which we kind of said the race for third, fourth, and fifth are going to be the most
Yeah.
exciting here. And it definitely
On this
was.
men's side, I'm going to say that Texas Roadhouse, maybe I guess on the women's side, we'll give the combativity award to Roxo, and on the men's side, we'll give the combativity award to Texas because,
Yep.
yeah, I think we'll give the combativity award to full teams here since it's an NCL race, and even if you're just talking about who's in the breakaway, they're subbing in and out. But Texas Roadhouse on the men definitely punched above their weight. You know, special mention I'll say to Mike's Bikes who got in the right move and scooped up some points, but they weren't able to make quite as good of use of it as Texas Roadhouse was able to here. Really early on, the first couple of laps, we had a lot of kind of underdog teams getting in there and scoring points with Volley Factory Racing getting in there and Kelly Benefits. This is the first race we've seen. I'm an INSIC race with Kelly Benefits, but big star. We've talked about him a lot on this show. Kind of had a hot and cold season, but got some points early and then got in a break and got a few more points here and there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Alma had a good race. He was hot today for Atlanta for sure. It was like a 6 or 7 man break, and they were able to roll it and stay away pretty well. And like these underdog teams, they knew they had to score some points just to get the extra money from being like ninth to seventh or like eighth to fifth, right? And so they really took it up, and they
yeah,
kind of knew again. They all kind of knew that Miami and Denver were only going to be concerned about each other and weren't going to be bothered with a couple points here and there scored by Kelly Benefits, and the teams really capitalized on that and were able to
hmm
shuffle, move up or move down a little bit on their overall standings.
So what we really like the important bit of this race was right around 25 to go. We saw a break get clear with I believe it was about 6 or 7 riders. I think it was two from Miami, one from Denver, two from Roadhouse, one from Kelly Benefits, and one from Mike Spikes. Roadhouse really, the reason I want to give the combativity award to Roadhouse is that they did a really good job of playing that to their advantage, where for several laps in a row, they would have their man in the breakaway attack before the pit, and I believe we're looking at it right now, attack before the pit, get a little gap, use the gap coming out of the gap and the fresh man coming out of the pit to hold that to the line and pick up the 3 points, knowing that, like, Denver and Miami both want those points, but neither of them is going to drive the group behind, knowing that they might get sprinted by the other. Especially
Yeah.
Denver is not going to drive it to chase to them because they've only got one guy in that move. So if he commits to the chase, he's going to get sprinted by Miami. And if Miami commits one guy to the chase, they might be handing 3 points to Denver and only getting two themselves. So that strategy worked for Texas like 3 or 4 times in a row. Yeah, pretty interesting tactics, and like the promise of the NCL actually fulfilling on some level with like interesting different tactical racing.
Yeah. And like we talked to Justin Kirk, the director of Texas Roadhouse, after the race, and I'm not gonna spoil their strategy because they may be like holding that close, but they had a really complicated pit strategy. They like figured it out.
Yeah.
Even Harris Wallace like walked up to him and was like, "You guys cracked the code. You figured it out." And they played it super well and super smart.
We said it to them, or we said it on our last episode, and we said it to him that like they were the team that had figured it out the best, and they were doing the most with the least in terms of star power or whatever. They had figured out the strategy, and we're definitely going to have him on in the off season, and maybe he'll talk us through the finer points of their strategy. I think they're going to have a lot going on, but they've kind of been they've been around for a long time, and they've been a good team for a long time, but this is the year where they've like kind of shown themselves the most and made the most out of their season, I think.
Yeah, and according to Justin, they're only getting bigger and better from here on out. So I'm excited for the future of that team.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely have to get them on. And speaking of people we've had on the show, Matt Winstead, who was on the show a couple months back. I believe we are looking at him scoring some points right here, but he did not get a lot of love from the announcers. So I want to shout him out specifically that, you know, and I get it. It's hard, Frankie and them seeing where they were broadcasting, and like the race was kind of happening behind them and they were looking at a TV in front. Like, I know that it's hard to live commentate on things. So this is not a criticism. They probably, are having trouble seeing his numbers and hard to recognize him. But yeah, whenever it was Matt Winstead, they would say Texas Roadhouse getting some points, but Winstead, guest on this channel, got several points. So awesome to see him out there ripping it and get to talk to him after the race about. He said he didn't love it because it was too hard. It was so hard to start and stop in the heat, but he made good on it. He's a Southern boy, so he's acclimated and picking up points where he could.
I was looking at his race on Strava after the fact, and he was right when it was hard. I think he did 500 watts for a full 2-minute lap. So it was no code. Yeah, and he's an aero guy. Like, he's the guy who's putting clay in his pedals because it saves half a watt. And for him to be doing that kind of power in the brake is frankly asinine.
Yeah, he is not a sprinter, and he was getting points against a brake that frequently, depending on who was subbed in or subbed out, had Van Rensburg in it, had Clever Martinez in it. Yeah, just a break with some heavy hitters of sprinting. So that was really, really good work for him to be, playing the tactics right and putting down the power. I think this was a crazy hard race. You didn't get as much sense of it on the broadcast because it wasn't cutting back to second and third groups as much, but this race just blew apart. Like, less than half of the people who started probably finished within contact, and there were groups all over the road. It was nuts. Even this breakaway would break down and get back together and change people, and it was all over the place. Yeah, which I liked. It was fun to watch.
Yeah, made it super fun to watch and really interesting. And this is sort of right. I think NCL Atlanta, at least on the racing side of it, really showed the potential of what the NCL races can be, and even overhearing some of the NCL staff kind of saying, "Yeah, we know Miami wasn't great racing wise." Like they admitted, like, "Hey, the four corner doesn't work for what we're doing. We're leaning more into, this style or more technical courses to make the racing more interesting." So hearing that and hearing that
Right.
the key core staff of the NCL is open to these changes, they're making these changes. They're not unaware of the issues that people have been talking about, and they're actively finding solutions for those issues, which is really all you can ask of an organization, in my opinion.
Sure. And so, all right, I guess I want to well, first I'll say just like, how it played out from this breakaway, four got away and it ended up being clever. Martinez pulled off the win, which there was some points changes for this race from the last race. Still 30 for first, but they brought the second place points up. But Miami got enough points that they locked down the whole season long win. Denver in second, and then Texas Roadhouse was third, not on the day. Fount actually had so many points that Fount was third on the day, which is crazy because the women scored all of their points. But I think that's the
Yep.
interesting thing of this format. But Texas Roadhouse was able to hold on to third for the series overall. So, having kind of wrapped up this race, getting into the more like global stuff, it was fun. It was fun to be there, fun to watch on the positive side. On the negative side, or maybe not negative, but like it seems like they are not emphasizing the like in-person experience as much, or their goal is not to get a lot of people to come watch these races in person. Their goal is to get a few people to pay for it and to really make their investors. It felt like the experience of being there was like more for the investors than it was for us or for people paying for the VIP or whatever.
Yep.
Which just is what it is.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest. Like, it's like box seats at sports. Like, you're there to network, you're there to socialize. Nobody was really watching the race like fully and intently. There was a lot of just hanging out, chatting, networking, and I think the NCL, like, they're trying to get people with the price of entry to this. They're trying to get people who have money and disposable income and liquid assets that they can invest, like attract people with money to come and invest into their into their racing and into the
Right.
organization. So that's the crowd they're trying to draw to the in-person events. And they kind of said they were going to do a mix of the city center and do a mix of these sort of private courses next year. But I definitely feel like for them as an organization, there's more return on really focusing on the stream and the broadcast portion of the event more so than the in-person aspect.
Yeah. So what that allows them to do is take a lot of that like the people who are coming there are people they're making a lot of money off per head, and that's not as many people they have to worry about. So that's bandwidth that they can kind of divert toward the stream. And I think that's the same thing with the closed courses. Is like if they're taking like having to deal with road closures, having to deal with paying cops to watch intersections. There's a lot of things that a closed course takes off your plate logistically. Even just like the venue having a nice VIP area already that's kind of set up for that type of experience, rather than them having to be like, all right, here's the course on the city streets. What spaces are along that, and how do we rent a place and outfit it for VIP and all that? Some of that work is done for them. So yeah, I hope. I I think it makes sense to me. I won't say like, oh, it's definitely the formula that's going to change cycling forever or whatever, but it makes sense that you would put your effort into the broadcast product, because that is the thing that there's sort of no ceiling on how many people can watch it. Whereas the in person, like only so many people are ever going to drive to any sporting event really, and the opportunity to make money off of that is low. So it makes
Yeah.
some sense.
No, I think it for them as a business, it makes perfect sense. Obviously, for us as spectators and fans, like we want to be able to get right on the course and be able to watch it for a relatively low cost, like cost of travel. Um, so that's a little bit of a burn. Like people were very unhappy with them and vocally unhappy with them, and social media comments and on YouTube and everything. But and I see where they're coming from, right? Like bike racing has traditionally been a
Hmm.
sport that anyone can come watch, and that's sort of been the pitch is that if you can get people to come watch it, then people will get interested in race in it. But for the NCL, I
And
don't
like
know.
the value, right? Well, I think a lot of that is also um, at the traditional races where you are like, hey, it's free to come watch. Let's get a bunch of like a Tulsa like delivers on that, where
Yep.
a lot of people do come watch, and it's getting a lot of eyeballs, or in Athens Twilight, it's getting a lot of eyeballs on the sport, and the value is for the sponsors like of the team and of the race, whereas NCL is it's aiming at a different model. So we said that like we had fun, uh, pretty, you know, I'd say we've been pretty positive overall. I think where my I still do have a gripe with the like we're gonna come in and change everything, and like I feel like they just came in too hot. I think if they
Yep.
and it feels like they're maybe trying to walk it back now by being like, oh, it's a pilot and we're figuring it out, and like move fast and break things kind of thing. But the first things they put out there were like we're gonna revolutionize everything and change everything, and we're gonna be the biggest and the best and all that. And it was like, I understand why you want to come out strong, but also it's like you've set yourself up for like they set the bar really high, and they maybe didn't meet that. Like they didn't deliver on all of the things. The technology side, I think there's so much stuff here. There's so many numbers. Like we've been talking about what we want to see time gaps on screens, see the points. I feel like they weren't showing that. They're showing lap times right now on what we're looking at. There's so much data that like uh they promised a sort of more interactive experience that we haven't gotten yet, and that's one of the bars they set for themselves and haven't cleared yet. Not that they won't, but it's like, yeah, I just want to acknowledge that there's some dissonance there.
Yeah. I mean, I think the people who are miffed with the NCL for them coming on too strong are like, I think it's a fair position to have because they came in super hot and heavy, like, we're the best, we're the greatest, we're going to revolutionize. This is going to be the new way that Americans race bikes. And if you've been in the sport for 20, 30 years and you've been putting on events and you've been working your butt off to grow this sport and you care about this sport, I mean, that's you're going to feel like your toes have been stepped on. You're going to be pissed off, and I think that's a fair feeling to have. But I think like NCL, they've kind of realized that people are unhappy with them a little bit, and they're sort of trying to walk it back, and they've changed some things they initially said they were going to do, and have tweaked things. I think they've realized that logistically some things are much more challenging than they initially thought, and they've kind of used this, well, it's a pilot now. And so I'm curious to see how they develop into next season and what tweaks they make and what changes are effective moving
Yeah,
forward.
yeah. To come full circle, it's like NCL wants to grow to more races this season. I think that's one of the things that they've consistently said and not walked back, is that they want to go to more races next season, which they were supposed to have four this season and only had three. So I don't
Yep.
know if they have four, but then, and we've talked about this season overall having too many races in general across the board. There have been too many high level crits, and it's hard to keep attention. And now we have crit, CRIT, the Lions Den series on top of everything, plus more NCL. I thought this year was peak crit, but maybe next year is peak crit. I don't know.
I think it's going to get
Next year
crazy.
could be the year that there are, yeah, there it could be that the year that there are even more too many races, and there are some that just like truly don't do anything in terms of like the ROI is very bad for, I don't know, 5 races or something, and we see a
Yeah.
big like we watch the bubble burst in real time. It could be next year, which I don't want to see. Again, I've talked about this a lot. NCL is getting a lot of people paid. It's giving a lot of people a platform to race on. Same with Legion. I think the fact that Blazers and Aviators seem to be like, well-funded teams that are giving a lot of talented people a place to race their bikes and commit to it fully. I think these are all good things. I would
Mhm.
like for them to, for the sport to continue to exist at that level and for that many people to commit to it. But also on the realistic side, it just seems like we're potentially going to jump the shark a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the only way I see it being resolved is like a more concise, true national calendar where you have if you have the 3 series, like maybe it's NCL spring, ACC summer, crit fall, and you have a certain number of like true creme de la creme races, right? And just if ACC makes it a little more of a concise calendar, or only focuses on certain races, and the your second tier down is more of a like regional team sort of centric, and maybe the one national team from that region shows up in races, like that could be a solution. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm afraid that in 2024 the racing is going to suffer at all of these races because everyone's just too spread out too thin.
Yeah, it's too big of a country also. Like each of these series is trying to be national, and for people to be going from St. Petersburg to Boise to, it's geographically going to get, I think we're going to see things splinter even further. I feel like we never saw the thing that I wanted to see, which is like all of these teams kind of going head to head. We sort of never got the real full showdown. Maybe Tulsa, I guess, but like even then there were some missing.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're going to see even more fracturing and splintering. So we had talked about an off season. I guess maybe Crit's going to go until December, and then we'll just start right back over. So maybe we won't have an off season.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot, but we are going to talk to some people. We're going to do some interesting interviews in the meantime, and let us know what you think about NCL. I know people have a lot of strongly held beliefs. Ben, you got anything else to close on?
No, I think that's it. I mean, looking forward to, I mean, Gateway Cups this weekend. That's going to wrap up the ACC series, and then we'll have a little bit of downtime. And I'm just excited to have a little bit of downtime where we can
Yeah,
talk about some things we pontificate on in the show. You know.
yeah, yeah. I guess that's one. I'm not sure if Gateway Cup is going to have a stream. We haven't had streams for all the ACC races, but that's another thing to think about. Is like I'm interested to see if Crit has streams. Not how are we going to cover? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe maybe the new line in the sand is just going to be if your race doesn't have a stream, we're just going to stop talking about it. Um, as an incentive for like if you want people to cover it for free, you got to give us something to cover.
Right, right. I mean, even Newport
All
News had
right,
like,
I'm gonna leave it there.
we're good.
Let's we want to see streams.
Yeah. Please stream your
Yeah,
races.
totally. All right, thanks everybody for hanging out. Thank you guys for watching us or listening to us, whatever, Subs yeah, stream your races and subscribe to us on the platform of your choice. See you guys later. Thanks.
See ya.